Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are the Youngs. Hey, thanks for joining us today, and we are happy to be back into our regular, what do we call this? Our regular series.
Well, we're finishing up our series on Loving Him Well by Dr. Gary Thomas.
And it has been a good series so far.
Yes.
We've gotten a lot of feedback from you, and we've enjoyed so much your joining us for these. We're going to kind of, after we've been through these two books, we kind of thought of a title. Periodically, we'll examine books, and we were thinking about books you need and why.
There we go.
And so we'll be doing some of these. So we're really in the second one. We covered, talked with you about sacred marriage, why you need that one. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about loving him well. Mm-hmm. And eventually we will probably maybe go to one more of his books called Cherish.
Yes.
And that's a really good one. But hey, before we jump in, we do want to remind you, a lot of people have been signing up for the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge Couples Prayer Advance.
Yes.
That's coming up in October. You can find information about that and even a link to signing up on our keepingityoungpodcast.com site.
Yes.
And so I hope you go by there, look that over. There's an RV park at the site. There's also motels in the area.
Wow.
There's a lot, and it's going to be a great conference.
Oh, yes, that's awesome.
We're already making plans for it. And also go to evangelistdaveyoung.com because we also have couples conferences coming up in Ohio here in just a few weeks.
Yes.
And we're going to be down in the Cincinnati area in April. We're going to be at Southland Christian Camp. That's coming up. 2 different conferences. That's also in April.
Yes.
And so we even have one in Colorado with Castle View Baptist. And then just a whole bunch just coming up. So
yes.
Be checking those out. Joining us if you can.
By the time this episode airs, we might have already been done with the one in
we'll be done with the one
Denver,
in Columbus, Ohio.
Colorado. Right, okay.
And so I think there'll still be time to get Denver in there.
Okay.
That'll be very, very, very
coming
very
up
short.
Quickly.
Yes.
Just check the schedule.
Yes, please do, and join us if you can. And several of you, we announced the winners last week from the Valentines Day, and we have not yet received any information as far as where to send your giveaway.
True, yes. So please send us your information.
So if you've not done so yet, check out the winners there and let us know, and we would love to get you a coffee date with the love of your life. All right?
All right.
So let's jump right in here today, and let's get talking again, just reviewing just a little bit of where we've been. We were talking about this book here, Loving Him Well by Gary Thomas. And by the way, stay tuned because we have a special interview coming up that we can't wait to share with you. That's going to be an exciting thing. But we've been working through this book, and part 1 was really titled about Your Marriage Makeover Begins With You.
Right.
And that kind of seems to be a Gary Thomas emphasis, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's a biblical emphasis.
Sure.
Because if you want to make something better, you really should start with you.
Sure. And he even makes the case in his last book, and many of you remember this, that even if your spouse never changes, you can.
Yes.
And your spiritual growth will make you a stronger and better person. And it really, your spouse may never change, but if they ever do, your changing will be the catalyst. Your growth will be the catalyst for theirs.
Absolutely. And
so
we have
really
a lot
great.
of, sorry, I didn't mean to talk on top of you there, but we have a lot of people that we talk with either out and about in ministry or contact us who the main focus is the spouse. My spouse is not doing right. And it is hard to understand that even if your spouse isn't doing right, you can take it upon yourself to grow in the Lord, to get closer to Christ. And it really will at least make your own personal life better, whether it makes your marriage better or not.
That's exactly right.
I don't know how to get that across to people, but it does work. I mean, apparently it works for Mr. Thomas. So
yes, and we've seen it work in other marriages as well, including in our own. And so we do agree with that. Then the part we're working through right now is part 2, where he called it creating a climate for change.
Yes.
And that's been a really good study so far. So I know you've already been through it with us a lot, or you can go back and pick it up. One of the things we parked on a while was that thing called functional fitness. And functional fixedness.
Yes.
I always want to say fitness, but it's fixedness. And so it's really an interesting part there. That's worth your buying the book just to work your way through that. It's very thought-provoking.
Yes.
And remember that GQ poll from December of 2004 in which In a poll of 1,000 men taken a number of years ago, just 10% of husbands, only 1 out of 10, believe their wives loved them more than they loved their wives. And we thought that was a very interesting stat.
Yes.
And talked about that a little bit. So we've just been going through quite a few variety of thoughts here. And now we're down here where we're kind of summing things up. We're not going to deal with the last section other than just to alert you that it's there, because we think you ought to buy the book for that.
Right. Those deal with individual needs, different things that may pop up and unique to different marriages.
Now, 2 weeks ago when we stopped recording this,
yes,
we were just touching on this idea of men need mental naps.
Yes, we had just finished. Stop expecting your husband to act like a woman, because he cannot do it. And we had mentioned men need mental naps, and then we had to stop. So let's jump in there, because
let's do that. And one author we read somewhere along the way called it actually the nothing box.
Yes.
And I can't remember where that came from.
That's what we just call it that. Our boys talk about that. I think we've had some young men travel with us who have said that I just need to be in my nothing box, or, I'm not doing anything, I'm just in my nothing box.
And really it explains why men scroll, for instance, instead of stopping on channels with stories and plots.
Right.
And if they do stop, they end up on almost like a non-thinking scene. It's a fight or a car chase. It's an escape scene.
Yes. Yes.
And so it really even affects how we as men scroll through social media differently than women.
Right.
But having said that, though, men's brains needing the mental nap is important to understand, because it helps us to understand why we are different in how we process things.
Absolutely.
And so whereas my wife can process things very quickly,
yes,
I have to take the time to think it through. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like my wife is wanting me to process it quickly.
Yes.
And part of the reason that confuses me is when I process something quickly, I think in terms of what am I going to do about it.
True.
When Bethley processes things quickly, she thinks in terms of how I feel about it.
How do I feel about this?
And feeling about it and doing about it are very different matters.
Very different, yes.
And understanding that about each other has a help. So ladies, you've got to understand that your man cannot be a woman.
No.
And you ought to thank God for that.
Yes, very true.
And yet you all also have to understand that his brain thinks differently than yours does.
Right. I was wondering, though, with the idea of mental naps, because I think you're talking about men need time to process things, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But the idea of men needing mental naps, I think in the book he was referring to, your man is out there, he's doing his job all day, he's bombarded with this and that and the other thing, he has to make all kinds of decisions. And sometimes when your man walks in the door, you want to just fill him up with everything that's happened in your day, whether it be something good that happened, so that's emotionally happy, or something bad that happened. When he walks through the door and you say, your children, and you follow that up with all of the horrible things that your children did during the day, or at least horrible to you, or what you're feeling right then. Why your man cannot take that on after his whole day of all of his work processing, than to come home and have to do family processing right away. I think he was saying, you know what, your husband really does need to hit the recliner for a few minutes. He needs that mental nap. He needs that space between taking care of work and taking care of home. So,
okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
And I guess I was getting ahead of us there probably.
That's okay.
But the idea of the mental nap then is that men need time where they can process and transition, whereas you as a lady you don't feel like you need that time.
Right. We can just jump from one thing to the other, and we sleep sometimes, and so that's apparently when our brain takes a little nap. I don't know. I mean, I dream very vividly.
Yes, you do.
So I don't know, but I do know that there are times where David may be working on something, he's just really focused on, and then all of a sudden he just puts everything down and he just sits and he doesn't do anything. And I'm thinking, how can you because for a girl, honestly, we sit down and we think of everything we did not do, and we probably better get up and get going on it. And men can actually sit there and not think about anything.
And it's a wonderful gift from God if you're a guy. But, the point Mr. Thomas makes is that that's important for a man to have those. He has to have those. He's designed that way by God. Mm-hmm. And the point is that wives, you need to understand that it's not an excuse for a husband to be lazy.
Right.
He's not making an excuse here for a husband not to be a leader, not to take the initiative. He's just simply saying that God designed men differently than he designed you. And one of those designs is men need mental naps.
Yes. He needs to go to the nothing box. And I think what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes will support that, in that men need time and that they need emotional rest and so on. Yes.
I remember one of my friends when he got married had told me that he really struggled between coming home from work and connecting with his wife, and he felt like he was failing there.
Yes.
And I remember one of the things I suggested to him was, say to your wife, let me come home and have 20 or 25 minutes to maybe even take a nap, a literal nap. Mm-hmm. And take that literal nap, refresh yourself, transition, let all the day's work go. And he was in ministry, so there's a ton of things in a man's mind when he's working with people.
Yes.
And it was amazing later, the follow-up on that, how much just a 20 or 25-minute transition, and he communicated that to her. She knew it. She expected it.
Yes.
And then once he was refreshed mentally,
then
he was able to transition into, now I can be with my wife. I've let this transition go, this event of the day go.
Right.
And so the mental naps are very important.
Yes.
And so wives understand that, and men don't abuse that, but understand your need for that and communicate.
It can be difficult because if I haven't seen David and he walks in the door, I just, not that I want to let him have it about anything. I'm just like, oh, good, there you are. You can help me carry this burden of whatever's been happening in my day. And I have learned it is good for him to be able to come in and just do that quiet, slow, maybe transition into, okay, now I'm home and I can take care of things at home.
Absolutely. And understanding that's a help. So let's get in here. We'll have to probably do at least one more session to get all of these in.
All righty.
But Mr. Thomas, in his book here, gives a list of husbands' needs. And,
should we just go ahead and listen or list them and then?
Well, let's list them and then go back and talk about them.
Okay.
He says a husband needs time.
Mm-hmm. Husband needs for wives to be gentle, patient, even succinct when presenting complaints.
And this goes along maybe with the mental nap. He said a husband needs emotional rest.
Yes. Understanding of their need to fix it.
And I like that one. That's big for a guy. And then he said that women need to be okay, their wives need to be okay with men's curiosity. And we're going to park on that one a few moments because that may be misleading if you don't hear the context.
True. Okay.
So let's talk about the time. This was an interesting statement. He says men may take up to 7 hours longer than women to process complex emotional data.
That one was very eye-opening. And I just, Mr. Thomas, he cites the author Shanti Feldhahn quite a bit in this book, Loving Him Well, because she wrote a book called For Wives Only, and it's all about how men think. So he does cite her, and I went ahead and I listened to her book on Audible just this past week. And it is amazing, the differences just psychologically and emotionally, socially with men and women, and how that women can go very quickly from this is what is happening, this is how I am processing what is happening, this is what I think about what is happening, and this is how I feel about what is happening, and how that husbands or men, they take so much longer to even think about, okay, what is going on? And what do I need to do about what's going on? And the last thing they think about, and sometimes they don't even want to think about, how do I feel about what is going on?
That is so true. And that's confusing to a lot of us as men because we feel like this book helped me because sometimes I feel like, I need to force myself into the emotion of it. I need to fit the emotion. I need to get in where my wife is. But when I force myself to jump into the emotion, I don't handle things well. I do have to take time to process the complexities of it all.
Yes.
Which for me is a matter of sensing your need in the middle of it,
Yes.
thinking about what needs to be done about it, and also trying to line up how I feel about it. And any one of those things by themselves is an overwhelming thing to a man, but all three of them coming together at the same time is really challenging.
So how can we relate to couples how to deal with that? Because I know in a girl's brain, we just thought of all of those things within a matter of seconds. And so sometimes we can get impatient. Well, I just thought that through. Why can't you think that through?
I would think there's two sides of that. From the man's side, I think it would be, men, remind yourself all the time, I need to listen. Just listen. And sometimes I have found that if I keep a pad of paper nearby and I jot down a few thoughts, because sometimes Bethany can feel so many things that she's sharing that it all becomes jumbled in my mind. And as I'm thinking about one, all of a sudden I can't remember the other. But if I jot things down briefly, just a one word to help myself stay in line with her. So it's a matter of my listening and sometimes recording what I'm hearing.
Good.
And then I think from the wife's side, and tell me if you agree with this, I think from the wife's side, understanding this about her husband allows her to take the time to give him grace.
Yes.
It changes her expectation to where she's not expecting him to be like her.
Right.
She's aware that I can expect him to respond the way my mom would, or my sister would, or my girlfriends would.
Absolutely.
He's listening. Thank God he's listening. And he's taking notes. Thank God he's taking notes. And then giving him the grace and the time. And I think the other key to this on both sides is communication.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I think somewhere along the way God helped us with, because when you say, okay, I know you need time to think about this.
Right.
Or you say, I don't want you to fix this, just hear me out.
Right.
I just need to get this off my chest. I know there's nothing you can do about it. When you communicate with me those things, and sometimes as a husband, I think it goes the other way. When I say to you, I don't know exactly how I feel about that, or I don't know exactly what I'm thinking about that, give me some time.
Yes.
And sometimes maybe the other word there would be schedule a follow-up.
True. Yes.
So if it takes 7 hours longer, so you could say it's 1:00. Let's talk about this at 8:00 tonight.
You could, or you could just, often David will say, oh, okay, thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll think that through and I'll get back with you. And sometimes if it's something to do with our schedule or the children or whatever, he won't even tell me when he takes care of it. For instance, if there was something I communicated to him about the children that I don't know, whether it's a disciplinary measure or a correction measure or whatever, and I'll say, hey, this is going on. I'm not sure what to do about it. He'll say, let me think that through and I'll get back with you. And then he'll go ahead, he'll think it through, he'll take care of it, and then he'll come back to me and say, hey, I just wanted you to know, I talked to the kids about this, and it's all taken care of. So I have learned that I do need to just give you time to do that. I know sometimes for women, we're like, no, do it right now. Do it right now. I know what to do about it. You do it, And instead of that, girls, just don't expect them to be like you, and give them the time they need to pray about it, to get wisdom from the Lord, and then to take care of it in their own way.
Absolutely. And really what he's talking about here is understanding the male mind.
Yes.
So that it's not a detriment to your marriage, but you can use it as a strength to your marriage.
Absolutely.
And so this time factor is really big.
It is.
And so communicate that. So remember, husbands, you're to listen and record. Listen and record.
Yes.
Remember, wives, to give grace and understand that he's listening and recording, and be okay with that.
Right.
And then schedule a time, but communicate through all of it.
Yes.
Wives, it's okay to communicate what you're expecting out of him. And husbands, it's okay for you to communicate that you don't understand.
Right.
And remember that the sin, it almost seems like sometimes for the man, the sin that showed up in the Garden of Eden was his silence. And he did not communicate. He did not step in. He did not make a decision. And there are times when you have to make a decision on the spot. So
True.
It's not an excuse for doing right when it's time to do right. But if we stay silent and we never come back to the issue, and we never help our wives solve the issue, then we are at fault.
Yes. And I think from a lady's perspective, if we understand that this is how God created you, so that you can take the time to think it through, to pray it through, to get an answer that is going to be wise for our family and for our marriage, if we understand that, then that keeps us securely in our role of, I can follow you. I don't have to take over.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of wives who don't understand that time factor, and they're like, well, he's not doing anything, so I'm just going to step in and I'm going to lead this home. And eventually, when we as wives do that, our husbands just say, okay, go ahead. You're not letting me lead, and so I'm not going to.
That's a good point as well. So let's take these last few moments here and deal with this second one here. Husbands need time, and then they need for their wives to be gentle and patient and even succinct when presenting complaints. Now, maybe the key word there is complaints.
Right.
Okay. And he says when men feel attacked by their wives, they will often react by stonewalling. When they feel attacked, they stonewall, which is a word that refers to shutting down emotionally and verbally, ignoring another person, and essentially withdrawing from any conversation. And there's an interesting quote that showed up in the same thought. The male cardiovascular system remains more reactive than the female and is slower to recover from stress. Since marital confrontation that activates vigilance takes a greater physical toll on a man, it's no surprise that men are more likely than women to attempt to avoid it. And that's a quote from Michael Gurian in his book, What Could He Be Thinking? How a Man's Mind Really Works. So let's talk about that. Mr. Thomas suggests that wives think the men's greatest need is to be heard and understood, but it's actually more helpful to think in terms of, I need to disarm my husband's defenses.
I think what he was saying is that the wife, she is thinking, I need to be heard and I need to be understood.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter how I present that to you. You just need to hear me. And as she is, pouring out all of this emotion at her husband, he doesn't know what to do with it. And he actually physically feels the barrage of it. According to this quote that we just read from Mr. Gurian. And so he's feeling this barrage of an attack. She's thinking, I'm just pouring out my emotion to you. And he starts to stonewall. Well, I'm just going to shut down. I can't do anything about this. I don't know how to process this. And she continues with, no, I need you to hear me. I need you to understand me. And he continues with, I just need to get away from you.
Absolutely.
I think, too, sometimes girls think of guys, well, you're big and strong and you can handle anything. But what Mr. Thomas is pointing out in this point is that, yes, your husband can take on the world and he can maybe even slay a dragon. But if he feels that you are attacking him, whether you're just pouring out your emotion from the day or you actually are attacking him because you have a complaint against him, he cannot handle that.
Okay, two things. Number one, do you think I can slay a dragon?
Of course.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And secondly, he says here that this is not to be a manipulation move.
No.
But a smart marriage move.
Absolutely.
When you understand that you have to disarm his defenses in the way you present a complaint. It is a smart marriage move. Any further thought on that? I mean, like practically speaking, how do you think that works from a wife's perspective?
Well, even a fresh illustration from this morning. I've been looking over our schedule. I've been looking over our schedule and things just compound. We just go from one meeting to the next and we've got a lot going on. And of course we need to podcast in the middle of it all and we've got counseling in the middle of it all, whatever. And so in looking this over, I was starting to feel overwhelmed. I have this and this and this to do before we leave on Friday. And then when we get back, I have this and this and this to do before we leave that next Wednesday. And, it just was starting to overwhelm me. And so in my feeling overwhelmed, I'm starting to feel emotional and I just need to share this with someone. And so David walks into the bedroom and I was doing my hair in the bathroom. And so it all came out. All of this stress. And instead of stopping and thinking, okay, when I pour all of this emotion out on David, he's going to maybe not feel personally attacked, but he definitely will feel that his ministry schedule is being attacked. He will definitely feel that there's nothing he can do about this, but obviously his wife is unhappy. So instead of thinking all of that through and just saying, hey, hon, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with this schedule. What can we do? Being gentle, patient, and succinct, I just float it all out. And he did not stonewall. David does not stonewall me. He doesn't just try to get away from me, but he immediately I could see this, not panic, but okay, what can I do about this? I mean, we have a schedule that's set. What can I do? And so I already know this. I already know that I need to be gentle and patient and succinct, but I didn't put it into practice this morning. So I think what I'm trying to say with all of that illustration is take a moment, take a breath, and if there's something you need to share with your husband that is emotional, ask the Lord to quiet and calm your spirit. And maybe give your husband time, and pick a good time when you've already settled down.
And on the other side of that, it did happen this morning, but it was okay because we communicated through it.
Oh, yes.
We asked a few questions of each other. You made it clear what you were thinking. I understood what you were thinking, and we were able to solve this and now record this podcast.
Yes. And we love each other.
And that's the real key. Well, hey, we are out of time, but these are really good. The husband needs time. He needs time. He needs for his wife to be gentle and patient and even succinct when presenting complaints is really good. We'll do one more week. And we're going to wind this book up. Yes, we should be able to
wind this up next week.
But join us next week because these are really good thoughts about what a husband needs. And ladies, I know you're learning from it, but men, ladies, get your husbands listening to this because when we men understand how God made us, it helps us to know how to handle ourselves in our marriage in a way that honors God as well. So these are really, really good things. Well, we're out of time. This is Keeping It Young. Thanks for listening.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.